This week on QDL, we look at strategic teams. What are they and how do they help your company achieve its strategic goals? Dan Wolf, author of Strategic Teams and Development, the field book for people making strategy happen, will tell us what makes a strategic team when we come back. Welcome back to QDL. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. Well, if your company is like my company and any other company I've ever worked for, it has goals. It sets goals. These could be production goals or sales goals or product development goals, cost reduction goals, all of the above. But goals by themselves are nothing without a blueprint, a strategy of how to achieve those goals. What actions will be taken and what resources are available to execute those actions. That's the strategy. But just as goals are nothing without a strategy to achieve them, a strategy is nothing without someone to oversee and coordinate and put that strategy into action. And that is where strategic teams come into play. A strategic team helps put that strategy into action. With us today to talk about strategic teams is Dan Wolf, president and co-founder of Doer Sloan, a consulting group focused on strategy direction, integration, and execution. Dan has held management and governance roles at Fortune 500 companies, as well as SME ventures and private equity ventures. He is also the author of Strategic Teams and Development, the field book for people making strategy happen. All right, Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dirk.
Okay, so before we get into this, I want to make sure that kind of my setup for this was right. Make sure we're setting the context correctly. So did I define company strategy correctly when I said it's the specific actions needed to achieve your objective?
We look at strategy as an active guidance system. It's a system for taking care of today in business and getting ready for tomorrow. And that's a challenge for most companies because there's so much to do today to meet this year's goals, to meet near-term priorities that many companies have a struggle with putting together the issues of today and tomorrow. We also look at strategy as more than just a blueprint and more than just a roadmap. I think that's where some companies get off track with strategy. Strategy is actually three things. It's the directional aspect, it's the integration aspect, and it's the execution aspect. In direction, we speak of focus and choices that a company makes, the directions they choose with the choices they make. We also speak of integration, which is really the messy part of strategy, putting together people, processes, capital, assets, resources, networks to enable strategy and to enable the teams who make strategy happen to do just that. And then finally, we have the execution component, which a lot of people see as the other end of strategy. Frankly, we think it's the easier part of strategy to take the everyday actions and put them together with everyday impact. But those are predicated on good integration in the right direction to begin with. So that's strategy in a nutshell.
Okay, so then so strategic teams are going to kind of oversee this process, I'm assuming. So kind of describe to me what a strategic team is really and what their function is within what you just described.
Well, strategic teams are specifically assigned to a charter or a function or a design role in an organization. So we have an organization as a whole, which is structured and resourced and staffed to do accounting and to do operations planning and to do supply chain management. But we also charter teams or assign teams to do specific roles to accomplish subtasks and projects and programs in the course of everyday business. We speak of 20 kinds of teams, strategic teams, and I'll get to those in just a moment. But when we break down a strategic team as a power unit in an organization structure, we look at three things. Number one, are they really engaged? Do they really understand, appreciate, and are they accountable for a piece or a part or a group of pieces and parts of the strategic agenda? direction, integration, and execution stuff we talked about a moment ago. Second, are they properly equipped with the right talent blocks and beams that make them able, or make them curious, or make them basically productive in making things happen in the strategic agenda? And third, is what they do consistent with the company's cultural agenda? A cultural agenda is really a foundation for and an expression of the company's strategic agenda. So, number one, do they function well as a member of the making strategy happen role? Number two, do they have the right talent blocks and beams? Talent meaning any number of things, from technical, resource, creative, solution kinds of talent, soft skills, hard skills, relational talent. Do they have those blocks and beams in place? And number three, are they really part of the culture, or are they running counter to the culture? So we put those together, and some companies, some large companies, some small companies, have many variations of these teams. Some of them are short-term, some of them are long-term, some of them are operating as tours of duty, but they are all serving as agents of making strategy happen.
So you mentioned several times there skills and skill blocks. So what skills are you looking for, and what is involved in these teams? I mean, are they drawn from different parts of the department, or how do you put these together to make sure that you have the skill blocks and so forth that you just mentioned?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that we look at is what is the design and role of a particular team to begin with. If they're a near-term team to supply talent to a near-term problem, generally we will draw people with this combination of skills, often technical, which is subject matter knowledge and direct expertise, some knowledge management, project management kinds of skills. And I would think that those are particularly important in the area of quality diagnostics, quality management, quality transformation, et cetera, et cetera. We also have analytic teams, skills that are largely driven by data and data patterns and data analytics. They may be driven today by more automation and applied analytics, predictive analytics, for example. We look for creative people who are able to manage ideas, create, construct, discover, probe ideas, connect old ideas and make new ideas. We look for resourceful people who, in my view, are able to MacGyver things. They're able to pull things together and do it with limited time, limited tools, limited money, limited other resources. We also have solution skills. Some people are particularly adept at identifying problems and managing the problem constructs and then coming up with solutions to those. And finally, we have relational skills, which is more than just getting along with other people and interpersonal skills. It's the magical skill of being able to bring out the best in others, kind of that Dale Carnegie principle that we all learned so many years ago. Now, when we look at different functions in the organization, it could be product planning, where there's a tremendous amount of cross-functional interaction, or it could be an information systems challenge or project. It could be a financial turnaround challenge or project, or a firefight. Those kinds of teams may have short-term and long-term assignments. They may have people that rotate in and out for training purposes or expertise purposes, and they may be reassigned to other business units, functions, departments, and even divisions. So the skill sets are what we call talent blocks. What they're surrounded by are what we call talent beams, and those are largely emotional intelligence and awareness issues. They're also career experience and category expertise issues, and they're also social intelligence. Do we have people with maze-bright skills who can see the forest for the trees and who appreciate context?
So another thing that interests me is, you're pulling in these people that have these different skill sets and so forth. I'm assuming these are teams, so teams are typically voluntary. You're not normally volunteered for a team. What motivates people to, I guess, number one, to be on these teams and to work within them, given that when you volunteer to be on a team, you're taking time away from, or in addition to, your regular job. So why would somebody want to be on a strategic team and take on that extra load? What's in it for them?
Well, first of all, let me just check a premise here. I think a lot of people are volunteered by others for teams. I think they are assigned, conscribed, lots of different words for it, stuck into. While there is some voluntary motivation, most of these strategic teams, from my experience, are assigned for one reason or another. And it could be because they have the right capabilities, and it could be because they're a good fit with a team. They've experienced it before, or they need development. Those who actually volunteer for these teams may be motivated due to the importance of the project itself. It's significant to the success of the enterprise. Some people are easily and readily engaged because they see it as an opportunity for their own skill set development and for promising experience going forward in the organization. People in general like to have some attachment to the purpose and the cause of the organization. So there's a belongingness motive, there's a self-actualization motive, but in a practical sense, people want to be involved in stuff that makes a difference. They also want to be with team colleagues who are worth sharing hard work with. And so you want to work with people that you appreciate working with, that you're friends with. You want to work with people that you can learn with. You want to work with people who can help move the needles in the organization, pull the levers, drive the cause. Those are the main motives, I think.
So when you mentioned a few times, that the team's got to work within the culture. I think that implies that you've got to have people who move easily within the culture and understand how that company culture works and dovetail well within it. So with that in mind, when you're hiring people, should you be hiring with the thought in the back of your mind that at some point you might want these people to be on a strategic team, or is that just a whole separate thing?
I think it's separate at all. I think if you are an organization that sees the value of these strategic teams, and I think more and more organizations are building themselves around this forward structure of strategic teams at every level. I think you want to hire with the notion that they will be able to find their way into working effectively and with teams, on teams, for teams, serving in teams. So I think, when you hire folks, you want to look at their skill sets, you want to look at their talent blocks and beams, their social capabilities, their emotional intelligence, those factors in bringing them on board. And there's a host of assessment tools and self-nomination tools that can be used in that regard. We also have people on the inside of the company that are willing and able to join in these teams and may serve as folks who are reservoirs of background and experience and history and knack and deep knowledge and sensitivity to the culture of the company. One thing we like to see in the formation of strategic teams is a blend of the fresh and the experienced, the very, very new and the very, very well experienced folks on the same team, so that you can accelerate the learning of the whole organization. I mean, we're 30 or 40 years deep into this idea of a learning organization. A learning organization is fertilized by strategic teams. It's cultivated by strategic teams. It's curated like a museum piece by strategic teams. That's how it works.
Well, okay, so you just mentioned here that in a way these have always been around, but maybe they weren't called strategic teams. I mean, 40 years ago, we may not have called them strategic teams. What was, let's say, the precursor to what you're talking about today? And how would they differ?
Well, I think what you've seen over the last 30 or 40 years is the evolution of the typical corporate structure. And this applies to large companies and small, but it also applies to nonprofits, government, institution, higher education, a wide range of settings. What's changed over the last 30 or 40 years? Well, the evolution of the hierarchy as an organization structure, the only organization structure. At the other end of the extreme today, we have holacracy, which means essentially no structure at all. I'm not sure that many people in organizations today follow that structureless model. So in between is where these teams fit. One thing that has advanced the cause of these as a form of structure is the need for more speed and agility in organizations, and nowhere is that more obvious and evident than in quality, operations, new product development, and disciplines like that. We're also living in an age where communication technology has put lightning under the capability of people to connect with one another, to coordinate, and to collaborate. Early in my career, we actually sent memos to people through intercompany mail. I mean, in the pre-web era, communication was a fraction of the speed it is today. Today, it's instantaneous. And that has enabled teams, and it's also enabled the formation and the reformation and the direction integration of teams. Better collaboration at every level, and this is important not only within the company, but also across supply chains and demand chains, where decisions are made, in some cases, lightning quick. This kind of strategic team activity fits with that faster collaboration, that better, faster, smarter, stronger, cheaper collaboration. And we're able to do that today. We weren't 40 years ago. Cultural differences are a factor. We have teams that function around the world today without ever being in the same room, without ever seeing each other in anything other than video form, without ever knowing each other on a personal go to have a beer basis. Finally, we have, I think, an interest today, really an interest over the last 10 years of developing significant leadership capital through involvement and experience and engagement with these strategic teams. I think probably like never before, we've had an opportunity to plug younger people in particular, as well as cross-generational groups into teams to work together to take advantage of existing knowledge, of knack, of the walking around knowledge that traditional companies have had, with new forms of insight and new forms of team activity and red team and gray team activity, comparative teams, offense teams, defense teams, and so on. Not all these teams are permanent. Very few of them, in fact, last very long. Some of them have tenures of less than 30 days. Some of them go on for years. Some of them change out members. But what's true in all cases is they've become the new structure of the corporation.
And Dan, obviously, I mentioned at the top here, you've written a book, Strategic Teams and Development. Maybe we can throw that book up on the screen there. There it is. Strategic Teams and Development, the field book for people making strategy happen. So is your book a how-to? Is it simply an explanation, or is it really kind of, you're interested in strategic teams, here's how you put them together?
Well, it's a little of all of that. We called it a field book. Actually, I allowed 2 summer interns a couple of years ago to force me into that title, a field book, because it's what it became. It's what it evolved into. It really has 3 major components. It describes the role that people need to have as agents of making strategy happen. And this is true not just at the senior leadership team level. This goes right down to the loading dock. I mean, this is bottom up, top down, teams at every level, at every functional core of the organization. So we spent some time in the front end of the book explaining that and how organizational needs have evolved. The second part of the book is really the field bookish part of this, where we look at these talent blocks and beams in great detail, asking literally hundreds of questions. I think there's maybe 500 questions in this book about talent blocks and beams and how they come together in teams to make teams stronger, better, faster, smarter, more efficient. And in those 6 sections on technical, analytic, creative, resource, solution, and relational skills, we explore the blocks and the barriers, as well as the incentives and the advantages of working together in those teams. We have a section in the book on culture that brings it all together. And then the back end of this book, as we call it, has about 40 pages of just thought starters, ideas for teams that get stuck, ideas for teams that are in trouble of coordination or getting along together or can't solve the problem. Throughout this book, we also have references, and in those references, rather than packing them into a nice, neat bibliography, we pack them into the page that the subject consideration occurs. So there's roughly 500 of these considerations that go along with each section of the book. So as a team is using this as a field book, they can say, hey, let's stop and look at the science of teams, what really makes these tick. Or, hey, let's stop and look at what really is getting in our way, what is constraining us from functioning effectively. Or, hey, what is the design of a team role really all about? And who's playing which roles on these teams to make them operate?
Now, I noticed, the last question here is I want to kind of focus a little bit on results. So your company, Doer Sloan, you guys consult with on teams and strategic teams and so forth. So, what is the kind of the before and after you expect to see when you come in to help people set up strategic teams? What is your kind of typical? This was the situation before, and then afterwards, and these are implemented and rolled out. What do you expect to see happen?
Well, it's a great question. I think the first most universal thing that we see is every organization has a strategy. They all have it stated. It's usually detailed. And the challenge with strategy in a modern organization is not the absence of strategy, but it's a strategy that doesn't fit together with the engagement of the employees of the organization. So there are research bodies that suggest that maybe only 20 or 25% of the work population is fully engaged in the strategic agenda of its organization. Well, that means that 75% of people either don't care, reject the assumptions and premises, don't feel like being accountable, et cetera, et cetera. We take a very positive view, and we go team by team, and we ask ourselves, okay, what is it going to take to make this organization's strategy happen within a time frame, with the resources they have and the capabilities they have and the assumptions and parameters and constraints of the organization. The second thing we look at is moving the needles that matter the most. And maybe a company has major challenges with their customers or distribution channels. Maybe they have too much clutter in their product development pipeline. Maybe their production operations, SNOP, et cetera, don't work well, don't organize well, don't put out the fires. We target those areas, get together, formulate the teams, get the teams together, develop them, use them as a crucible for workforce development or leadership development, management development, system development. And that becomes the laboratory for making strategy happen. Now, the good news is that many people in these organizations have great capability and great confidence. The challenge for us is putting them together in a way where those teams are more harmonious. And by harmonious, I mean their skills match up. For example, we want people with very strong technical skills to make sure that in their teams, they're matched up with people with very strong relational skills. There's an obvious reason for that, but in a nutshell is we need to communicate well the most technical aspects of the strategic agenda. Likewise, we like to put analytic people together with solution people, because analytic people can get enamored with the data and miss the point of making a decision or managing a risk. Right. And we like to put creative people together with resource people, because this is not always the case, but many times creative people in mixing and managing old and new ideas may have less overall regard for calendars, clocks, and budgets. So in working together and forming that bridge, creative and resource people can harmonize each other a little better. The net on all of this, though, is that people working together to make strategy happen are more focused on results. They tend to be more enabled by being involved in the purpose of the company, whether it's customer focused or quality improvement focused. And they tend to be more capable of learning in an environment where they actually move the needles and get results short term. That seems to us to be one of the greatest advantages of working with strategic teams. People learn faster in the act of doing work. It doesn't take them a 3-year rotation at a big company to figure out what's going on. They figure out what's going on in a year, rotating through maybe a half dozen or more projects.
All right. Well, Dan, we're at the end of our time here. This has been Daniel Wolf, author of Strategic Teams and Development, the field book for people making strategy happen. Dan, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. Good stuff.
Thank you very much, Dirk.
All right. So if you want more information on Dan's book, you can follow the link underneath down there. It links out to, I believe that links out to his book on his website and also on Amazon as well, I believe. So if you want more information on strategic team building, check out Dan's book. All right. Let's show that book one more time just so people see what it looks like and what that title is. There we go. Strategic Teams and Development, the field book for people making strategy happen by Daniel Wolf. All right, so that is it for today's show. Thank you all for joining us. As usual, if there's some topic or book or technology or something you'd like to see on the show, just send your suggestions to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll see what we can do. So thanks for joining us today. We will see you next week on QDL. So long.